Okay, well, good morning, everybody. The Selectmen decided they would join you this morning because we want to both hear a fresh start from our newly hired architects, LBA, and also we just wanted to get started. And some of you have talked to us over the last few weeks and said, gee, things seem to be going a little slow. You know, why are we here? What are we doing? And so on. And we thought we'd just give you an opportunity to say that out loud to all of us, or maybe we could explain why we're where we are. As you may recall, we got started slowly because we waited a couple of months in the beginning of the winter because of waiting for the town meeting vote. Then we appointed you all to the committee, and then we went through a process of considering what to do about hiring LBA or some other architect. But I think today is the day when we really get things going, roll up our sleeves. I'm glad to see a lot of people short sleeve shirts on this morning, and when we hear what LBA is going to say to us today, that we'll see that our real purpose here is that we're gathering data, and throughout the next 12 weeks or so, you all are going to be asked to keep looking at what they provide, asking questions, providing new input, because at the end of the day, you're going to have to say to the three of us, here's what we think the town ought to do. And that's a fairly big assignment for the next 3 months. So if you sense that things got off to a little bit of a slow start, that's partially our fault for not meeting every week, but I guess we could have done that, but that seemed a little bit heavy. And so here we are now, ready to, I think, mark June 14th is the real kickoff date to get our work done. And one of the things we thought about is, rather than all of you having to pigeonhole one of us or something and say, well, I got a thought, or something's not working or something, we thought maybe it'd be useful if one of you became sort of the coordinating person. There's not a chair, not a facilitator, that's certainly Tony, but to just sort of make sure there's a touch point within the community to talk to. And Bibi's been talking around, has some ideas on that. So Bibi?
Got it. All right. Good morning. Glad to see you all here this morning. Yeah, so after having some conversations with a few of you, we thought maybe it might be a good idea to have, as Bill said, one person designated to kind of be the leader and coordinator of the group and be that sort of chain of communication point person, so that multiple people aren't reaching out to multiple others within the town. So I had a conversation with Ashley, and she's willing to do it if you all agree. We can do it, a formal process, make a motion to do it, or if anybody has any comments, or if everybody agrees. And Ashley's agreed to step up to be that point person. So
I'll make a motion that we appoint Ashley.
excellent. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Beautiful. Now, Ashley, do you want a second? Do you want a second person to support you?
I would love a second person.
Okay, I would suggest perhaps Jim Casey might be willing to support you as that second person.
Gosh, that's really lovely. Jim, are you up for it?
I'd be happy to support you, Ashley.
Appreciate you.
Okay, anybody want to make a motion for Jim? All right, all in favor? Awesome. All right, thank you all for being here. We really look forward to your work on this committee and your input. It's really important to all of us.
So Ashley and Jim, thank you, and I think this also helps relieve Emily a little bit of thinking that she's sort of the person here who speaks up first for the town, and she needs to be more of a resource than a leader of the group. Just to remind us, and to remind the two of you gentlemen, there's only four answers can come out of this group. One is we can renovate the existing facility. Second of all, we can remove the existing facility and build a new one on this site. Third of all, we can build a new facility on a new site. And fourth of all, we can renovate an existing building. throughout all this process, we've never thought there were more than those four alternatives. Building out of town does not seem to make sense. A mobile police station doesn't seem to make sense. So I think those are the four alternatives. So that's where we are. And if you have any other questions for the three of us this morning, you can start now or anytime. Otherwise, we're just going to sit back and listen and turn it over to Tony and to Tony introduce the people from Lavallee and so on.
Great, well, thank you. Thank you. There we go. Thank you again for coming here. Today's agenda is really the introduction of the Lavallee team to you all and to start that process. After this meeting concludes, we're going to use the time here on site to meet with Chief and do some of the background work. Knowing that the designer selection process, we had a lot of discussions early on about the types of projects, looking at past projects of the designers and how we got to this point. So I think it's good that you all, kick the tires, so to speak, right? And Bob and John are here, and they're perfectly able to answer all the questions about previous experience. And although we put out an RFP that said we're going to study multiple sites and multiple options, it was important that we get the contract at least somewhat aligned to the request for proposal, right? You put out an RFP, you got to hire somebody based on that. Whether we change that, and there's been a lot of emails that you've all been on copy to, is it one site, is it three site, is it answering one of the four questions in greater detail than the other options of renovate, remove, rebuild, renovate a different building? All of that can be worked within the confines of your existing, now current contract. Lavallee has experience with all aspects of, do we build new, do we renovate here, do we renovate elsewhere, how many different sites do we look at? But again, falling back to our original RFP, there were three sites that were selected. One of those has now, for whatever reason, been taken off the table. It's no longer for sale, or whatever reason, it's no longer available to us. So we look at different alternatives, and we can do that as a group. You may say, well then great, give us two there and one somewhere else. Or if there is a building that comes up during this process that you say, what about looking at an existing building elsewhere and renovating that? I think, option number 4, as Bill described it, we've got some room, we've got some design time, we've got the experts at the table now that can do that with us and bring us through that process. So it really opened up the flexibility within the confines of the contract and within the experience of Lavallee as a team to look at the various options and answer those 4 questions. And Bill, I'll end with renovate existing, remove and rebuild, new build elsewhere, renovate another building elsewhere. I think you covered the bases there. Beyond that, I don't know what more we would do as an option. So those 4 are kind of where everybody ends up in one of those pots. And in the 12 weeks, that comes much later. There were a couple other emails relative to the studies. I'll let Bob and John talk more about how they look at those, how they look at that information and compare it to other recent and relevant stations that they've worked on and facilities that they've worked on collectively with Collier's and my experience, Chief's input from how this particular department operates, because again, it is a little different. When we add that regional dispatch component, it's not ideally duplicated from any one community anywhere else. It's got its own nuances that will change and modify layout, accessibility, approach, staffing, parking, all of those things get massaged to your community, whether it's we start with something from Manchester or the Myers Report or a Harriman station. It's going to fit this community. It's going to operate the way this department needs it to operate for the benefit of the public and to best serve the services that it provides. So, any questions relative to the contract, how we got here? I know we talked about going and visiting stations, but here's where we are, and I won't speak for Bob too much, but I'm sure if you still wanted to go look at stations, we often do that, if not with the selection of the architectural process, once the architect's on board, because it's good to go visit those stations with the guy that designed it, right? And take us through why those decisions were made.
So Tony, you and I both referred to Bob and John, but we didn't introduce them.
Now I'm going to introduce them. Well, I'm going to introduce Bob. I don't know John as well as I do Bob. Lavallee Brensinger has been around for a long time. We've been to many trade shows together. I know Chief just went to the New Hampshire trade show and met Bob and his team there. You guys have been in business for a long time. We've known and battered around each other for
47.
I won't say 47, so somewhere over 25, less than 47.
No, I mean the business.
And I'll turn it over to you. Go ahead.
Okay, hi. This is, my name is Bob Robichek. I'm the principal in charge for the project. I'm the civic studio leader, and I'm also the lead public safety planner for the firm. I've been with Lavallee Brensinger, will be 10 years in October. Prior to that, I just graduated college. I'm kidding. I worked in the Midwest for 33 plus years. I have been doing public safety work for over 35 years this is my 44th year of practice. I've done work for everything from local police departments to sheriff's departments to state police to FBI, federal marshals, U.S. Postal Service police, and pretty much probably every other three-letter agency you could probably imagine. Through that, I've been, through a bunch of training as a designer, also at the federal levels for security and so on. But John and I are working together. John's my right-hand guy. We have a team of about 5 people that really focus on public safety. We're working together right now on at least 6 public safety projects. We have one in construction in Lincoln that we can take you to. It's not that far away. That's a community that's somewhat like yours. Rather than taking you to Manchester, I don't know what you're gonna really get from that, frankly. One of the things you can get from us is the honest truth. We're not gonna BS you. We're not gonna gaslight you. You're paying us money. We're gonna be honest with you. Some of the things we say you might like, some things we say you might not like, but we're here to help you, not to just tell you to be your yes people. That's not what you're paying us for. I would just say one last thing is that, before turning over to John so he can introduce himself, is that every department and every community is different. And I want to address something you said, Tony, a second ago. We brought copies of the reports done by other firms. We actually printed them. We have them. We have a digital version of it. We're gonna study those. We actually already have to some extent. Some of that stuff's no longer valid. Some still might be. But when we are going to start work on your project next week, we're going to start today really because we're going to meet with the chief and her staff and Tony after this. We're really going to look at this with fresh eyes, and that's what John and I talked about. And we're not going to, we're going to respect what's done before. We're not going to judge as being right or wrong. The proof's going to be in the pudding. And everything starts with a space program. Once we come up with a space program, which was part of the other 2 studies, that's going to be our touchstone, right, John? And that's going to be, we're going to look at, that's the lens we're going to look at for any of those 4 options that Bill mentioned, okay? We have no preconceived notions. We're going to have an open mind. It's your building, not Lavallee Brensinger's and not Collier's. And we also understand that money doesn't come easy, and we have a famous saying in our firm where people say it's not about the money, it's about the money. So budgets are budgets. We understand that you got to pass a warrant, right? And that's going to be very important. And we understand that, so we're not allowed here just to spend the money. I would just say one last thing regarding the regional dispatch. If you have a regional dispatch, It does change some things because theoretically, that kind of a facility should be, I'm going to speak some architectese, but should be IBC, International Building Code Category 4 building. This building can never be that. An addition might be able to be that. A new building could be that. And I'm not sure if you're going to have married to that a regional, well, with a regional dispatch, kind of an EOC, Emergency Operations Center. And if it's regional, whatever regional means, usually means you're the biggest town in the neighborhood, is what it means, right? Yeah, so other communities are looking to you to help. That also should be an IBC Category 4, theoretically. So I'm going to leave it at that without getting any more in the weeds, but I'm going to turn over to John, and he can introduce himself.
I won't be as winded as Bob, but
I wanted to answer the question.
no, I'm only kidding. I'm John Adams. I'm the project manager with the Lavallee Brensinger. I've been with Lavallee for 15 years, and I was with another firm for another 15, so I'm a little over 30 years of experience. I've been working with Bob for the past 10 years, 5 years of it of public safety, and I've varied from education work to healthcare, and found a passion for public safety, working with first responders and stuff like that. So basically trying to finish out my career in public safety. So looking forward to working with everyone, and I think we're going to have a pretty successful project here. So.
I'd like to ask about the assessment of the building from the safety aspect of the police officers as well as the community, and if there's state and national assessment of the safety of the building that has been conducted, and what were the findings, if so? Thank you.
If that's for LBA, we are not aware of that as part of prior studies. Your building is unique well, it's not unique in New Hampshire or in northern New England, is that you have a multi-purpose building. You've got a town hall, you've got a recreation department, you have a police department. So that's not uncommon. In Lincoln, the police department was in the walkout basement, basically, of their town hall. And so they're right below town hall, right? So ideally, you have a police station that's a police station so that you can secure the perimeter, you can secure the parking for officers and cruisers, you can control where the public parks, you can control public access to the building. Well, when you have a building that's recreation, town hall, police department, you kind of, that goes out the window, right? So I'm not aware that you're talking about SEPTED, which is environmental design. It's prevention of crime through environmental design, SEPTED. That's an inside-out onion. You start with the site location, the site, the parking, circulation, and you go into the public areas, and you go. So that's what you're talking about. I'm not aware that's been done. I think the assessment that we were going to do for the project, I believe, Tony and the chief and John, was to do an update on a conditions assessment that was done on the prior two studies. So we're going to use that as a springboard, Bill. We talked about that with Colliers. We're not just going to, so the person doing that assessment for the building conditions is Dale. Dale's not with us today. He's going to be on site in a couple of weeks. We'll arrange that with the town. He's going to bring our engineering folks with him, and they're going to do an update to the studies that are, John, I think, has got his elbow on that study. So when we look at an addition renovation for this building or any other building, whether it's a new building or this building, we're going to look at those things as a part of the normal planning process. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Yes, it does. I think that all of us have taken the tour of the police department and know the condition and the needs. But I, having been in emergency management for 25 years of my life, I know that I was very concerned when I looked at the Sally Port, not only about the storage, and I know that that could be taken care of, but also the, the location of it. And I didn't know whether it could be reconfigured or so that it, and my concern is that it's so near the public green with the children. Okay.
I'm going to have John share the most recent conversation about a Sally Port and storage in the Sally, and because what you're saying is right up our alley, and I'll let John talk about that.
Yeah, so typically the assessment's going to basically break out any sort of code violations, any sort of circulation issues, stuff like that, that's going to help us determine, any sort of upgrades for the building. What Bob and I are going to do is basically do a program to figure out what the needs are for the department itself and figure out where the pros and cons are currently right now. Typically, a lot of stations use the Sally Port for storage. We take all that stuff out and we find storage spaces for it so that we have safer spaces where, a detainee can't grab something. That's all the stuff that we're going to integrate into our work.
And I think to answer even more, this kind of an inside joke for anybody who does police, public safety planning, and that is you walk in a police department and you go in their Sally Port, and because they have no storage room, you have tires in there for winter, you've got like all kinds of things like tire irons. I mean, when you're booking somebody and you're bringing them in there, you don't want to have anything that could possibly be used as a weapon of any kind. And some of these Sally Ports, I couldn't fit between the car door and the cruiser and the wall. And unless you've booked a 300-pound male that's high on crack, who is hard to handle to begin with, when you're in that confined space with them, that's a very dangerous situation, right? But the other thing you bring up is site security, which John and I have dealt with quite a lot. And that's a challenge for a mixed-use building like yours. It's a challenge for a smaller site, right? How you separate, there's three sort of areas of a police station for a site, right? There's public, there is employees, there's cruisers and police vehicles, whatever they might be. They could be ATV, could be anything. And then you've got your booking and intake, and you don't want to have that through your public parking, obviously. You can avoid it. You don't want to be releasing offenders that you're releasing on bail into a parking lot with kids in it. Well, I've seen communities where the library was next to the town hall and police, and you're releasing offenders like literally next to the library. So we understand that. Now, can you do that here? We don't. We just got hired. We don't know. To be honest, right? We don't know. So
Right, but some of those conversations, as we talk about those scenarios, and you may have heard those scenarios as concerns from the chief and from the department over the years, which has led you here, you then start to look at where we are and start to think about even renovating, or we off-site the PD for a while and we tear this whole thing down and we build new right here. Does that make the best safety logical sense for the community, given the geographic location, the proximity to the park, the types of park events that are held here, or as a group, do you all say, you know what, we can do this here, but it doesn't make sense for our downtown community, and it doesn't make sense for the safety of the public. Let's move this off such a strong present site within the community. But I will remind the group, we had one concern, and I'm sure we'll address it somewhere through the process, and why we keep these kind of notes. There was a concern raised a couple meetings ago about if everybody starts leaving downtown, and this is just another piece of the downtown public services that leaves downtown, what does that say about our downtown presence? So while there's a lot of things that might lead us in defining a solution to go elsewhere, site proximity, logistics, construction, even cost, we need to keep that in mind because it is a concern of the community to not abandon downtown. So,
Yeah, I mean, John is a snowboarder, I'm a skier, and I'm an alpine race coach, so I come to races here all the time. I've stayed at the Lantern many times down the road. We're very familiar with the Goose, we know this community pretty well. I was telling Bill, my son almost ended up ski racing for Colby Sawyer, but he ended up somewhere else. If I come in a community, and I know this community pretty well for not being, living here, and I was to come in and tell you to tear half this building down, I'd probably leave the car running with John at the wheel, because, we understand the texture of this town. This is a nifty building, but I think without getting into weeds, you're right, there's a lot of challenges here. So if you get one bite at the apple one time to do something for the next 40 to 50 years, it's got to be really well thought out, because the worst thing you can do is put good money after bad, so to speak. But again, we don't live here, but it's a beautiful old building. I can imagine the opposition you could have for that. But
Bob, you mentioned that Bucher, as it stands right now, would not meet IBC code for a regional dispatch center. Throughout this process, Emily, select people, are we going to evaluate how important it is to be a regional dispatch center, and at what cost to the taxpayers is it going to be to create a building that has a higher code level, therefore more cost to go that route, especially where we've talked about asking the other towns to contribute to a new building dispatch center is likely not to happen.
yeah, let me start answering, and then I'm sure Chief and others can weigh in. The process that we've been hired, commissioned to perform is to study the existing operation and the potential for addition, new building, what it needs to operate in its current capacity or future expansion. If in that dialogue, one of those options is we're going to drop regional dispatch, how does that change the needs of New London's police department to operate? That's certainly a square footage. It's a huge cost that you don't have to embark on. But this team is not going to be able to perform that business calls study for a regional dispatch. That's a different type of entity. There's the Collins Center. There's a few others that do municipal operating studies at that level. It's not so much an architectural site selection building study as it is how does your town operate. Does that make sense?
Yes, but it doesn't answer the question. It doesn't solve the issue, and I think we've been told before there are things that are not going to be in our realm to talk about, like what happens to Bucher. But I think from a voter going to a town warrant, if I find out that we're going to renovate Bucher, but it's going to cost $4 million more to make it a regional dispatch, I'm going to stand up and want to know, why are we a regional dispatch? So whether Lavallee is not the responsible people, I think it's important that that be brought into the conversation.
Just, we'll put it on the list with the preserve downtown, right? You heard me talk about that.
Yeah.
That's an item that I would say goes to the select board and goes back to those communities that are currently being supported by a regional.
But even in the big picture, if we go to a brand-new site and dispatch has to meet those codes, and those codes
Correct.
cost more, we need to know that.
No, they absolutely do.
they absolutely do.
I think this perhaps should have been a conversation long ago then, because if the discussion now is, do we drop being a regional dispatch center, that's a gigantic discussion, no?
Yes. It's a
And one-
big part of your
Right, so
operations, and just from a technical tower, radio, communications. I'm just going to swag, it's probably 50% of your cost.
Sure, and I feel like if that's a consideration, this all needs to be tabled, and we need to talk about that as a town first, because having this discussion now seems ridiculous if we're going to have to go back to the drawing board with whether we're a regional or not. And I feel like that's going to be a big hill to climb, and I don't see that we're ever going to drop being a regional, in which case, then we need to have the discussion of, if this building can't be IBC Category 4 rated, then tells the story right there. That's an answer, in my opinion.
So John and I have done a lot of dispatch, and I'm just going to, based on our limited understanding, so I have to apologize a little bit about that, is that when we do programming over the next 2 to 3 weeks, whatever it takes to get to the program, because without the program, we can't do anything, we would be programming for the dispatch you have, which is whatever, let's say, I'm just role-playing here, so, when you're taking notes or whatever, let's say you have one console now, but you we're looking 20 years out at least, right? So we have 2 consoles, okay? But that's just for the town, okay? You with me? But if it's going to be so that's got certain footage with it, right? We have a break room, we have a toilet, a unisex toilet there, we have some lockers, so it's self-contained, okay? So dispatch 24/7. They don't have to go out into the police station, off hours, into unsecured, it's all secured theoretically, but into potentially less secured space, okay? If you decide that you're going to be a regional, right, John, we might have, I'm just role-playing, we may have 4 consoles. And so the program gets bigger, we need a slightly bigger break room, we need a little bit bigger area for lockers. We may have a dispatch supervisor office, which is, 100 square feet. And maybe 20 years from now, there may be a 5th console, right, John? So we can take that program difference and keep it to below the line, if I can say that, right, John? Yep. Below the line, to understand that, again, a role play here. Let's say the dispatch has to be 800 square feet, but for a regional, it's going to be 1,500 square feet, right? You with me? Right. So we can understand what that is, what the implications for the cost are, and we can run that in parallel. Now, at some point, we have to make when we start doing the planning, we have to make some decisions. Which is it? Is it the 800 or the 1,500 or 2,000 square feet, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to...
And this probably is for Emily. Based upon the call volume of New London in our region, and I'm not sure what that consists of totally, does New London have, would you say, the largest call volume?
Yes.
And that includes medical, not just police?
Yes,
And fire, yeah, okay.
definitely. If I could just offer a few things, I have a few things written down in no particular order, but just for some context, the dispatch center has been in place in this town since, I think it was March of 1975. So we have been served by our own dispatch for 50 years, just about. In 2014, there was a dispatch study done to see if it would be more beneficial for the town to have someone else dispatch for us or to keep our dispatch center. And the result of that study was to keep the dispatch center. And it's really multifaceted, and I won't go into all of the details of that study. I think it's certainly available if folks want to read it. But one of the major pieces of it is if we were to go somewhere else, there's an incredible loss of local control that the town would have over dispatching services. And that is a very, very real thing. So knowing that the town of Bow had, within the past several years, gotten rid of their dispatch center when they moved into their new building, I made a phone call down to Bow PD and I spoke to their chief, who wasn't there during that transition period, but I spoke to another veteran officer who was there, who had lived through Bow PD having their own dispatch center, going to their new PD and not having their dispatch center. And his words were where it was the single most detrimental decision made in the history of Bow PD, was to get rid of their dispatch center. So take that for whatever you want it to be, but from their perspective, from an insider's perspective, it was very, very detrimental to their daily operations, to their functioning, to decide to get rid of their dispatch center. It's not a reflection on their current dispatching service, but to lose that amount of local control over dispatching services, I think would be very detrimental as well for the town of New London, which I know that's what we are all concerned about, but it would also have a huge impact for the other communities as well. And additionally, I haven't heard that the vast majority of folks here in town want to get rid of their dispatch center. I think certainly over the past several years, but focusing a lot on the last few years, we've made some incredible advancements and investments in the dispatch center in the form of technology, equipment. The town supported a 5th full-time dispatch position a couple of years ago in order to be able to support the center, so, which we appreciate very much. So I think that from my perspective, the tone is not that they're looking to get rid of dispatch, it's that we're improving and making investments in the dispatch center in a variety of ways.
Just going to add to that, Emily, is that what happens too when you give that up and you're not in control of your dispatch, can be a delay in you finding out, the communication, there can be a delay.
Yes, and I'll say also, I mean, the dispatchers, they work here, they know the towns, many of them live in the towns or in this immediate area, and so, again, a loss of local control that would not be experienced, I think, just by us, but by folks who call into the dispatch center, and if it's dispatched by somebody who's not local, they just might not be as familiar with our community as we would like them to be.
I've got a question. I'd love to hear a little bit about your experience working with citizen advisory boards or committees on similar projects, and if you have had experience with that, what are you hoping for from us, and what are some things that we can think about as we partner with you guys for the next few months?
Did I give you a gift card to ask that question?
No, I'm a former recruiter, so.
No, we have
with committees before.
Oh yeah, we've worked with a lot of committees, but that's true. I think that we have we were told we have to be done by the end of September. I'm sorry, because you want to get your word out to the community. You want to. We understand that. We've been very active in the past in helping some of our clients, if they wanted, with community outreach, which is very important. But anyway, some of our projects have committees that are very involved. Others have no committees. Others have committees that are there but not that involved. The biggest issue, for us, I think, for our team, is because we have 12 to 14 weeks, is to get timely feedback, and, we bring expertise. We're going to work with your command staff and your police department, and with Tony's done a lot of public safety. So at some point, we're going to take any input you give us, but at some point, you also have to trust our judgment as well, Where it gets a little dicey, frankly, is where people start to question every single thing that's done in a very short time frame that we have. And it's paralysis by analysis. You can't get anything done, And so I think timely input, is important. We're open to communication. We're working, with multiple committees. Some of them are very large. Probably the biggest project I'm working on right now is City of Portsmouth. We're in the beginning design phases of their police department. It's going to be a larger building, but we have 2 advisory committees there, but that's a much larger project. It's a bigger community, right? Lebanon, we're working with the Lebanon project, for example. We're just breaking ground in mid-August, right, John? It's a new fire station right on the square, which is also a very delicate site. Obviously, it's in their main square. there really wasn't a committee. So, we're open to anything. We just, it's mutual respect and also timely feedback. If we had 6 months, it would be not as critical, but we don't have a lot of time. And there's a lot of things in play. I wrote the 4 options, whether those are options or not, so, does that make sense? Yeah.
I just have a quick side note, and I think, Annie, I saw you nodding about this, and I sort of agree. I think it was Phil Sherman who suggested that, moving the police station from here to a location on the way out of town is taking away from the downtown. To me, downtown is the post office to Colby Sawyer or the Our Lady of Fatima. That's our downtown. Sure, this is the village, but our downtown is much bigger. And so to pigeonhole us into one strip of Main Street seems a little narrow-minded.
And I think that's important for the select board to hear. My role, I'll talk for a second, is to take all the input that I hear from you all and try to translate that into an architectural response so that Bob is providing the architectural response to that concern. We're addressing the concern or holding the concern for a later consideration, but not losing track of it. So to the point of timeliness, if you look at the other studies that were done, conference room is 10 by 12, it seats 4 people, those kind of things. As we start to move through this, which is going to happen very rapidly because we've got the base work and we get caught up and we have these meetings, you're going to get a lot of those documents. I want you to always feel that you can email me. I don't care what question it is, how come this room is that size. We're going to put it on the same list with the downtown response. What is downtown? How much, are we going to continue to dispatch regionally or not? So that we're addressing those, because in order for you to help us with that timeline, I need to grab those questions as quickly as possible so that when we're here every other Friday, you're one, feeling that your concerns are being heard and addressed, and you're able to make the decisions to tell us, stay downtown, don't stay downtown, go look at this site, go look at that site, drop dispatch, don't drop dispatch, right? So I hope that I want that channel open. It's very important. You're going to get a lot of documents, a lot of information. One downside is the paralysis by analysis. The other that we often get is committee members that get something, don't feel they have the expertise. I don't think I have the experience to review why a conference room is, and a conference room might be a simple example, but why booking is set up the way it is, or why a Sally Port is designed the way it is. You know what? It's a learning experience. We need to learn how your department and what the concerns are of your work group and your community in order to provide solutions that are responsive to those concerns.
So Tony, just as I said at the beginning about rolling our sleeves up now and then asking Ashley and Jim to act as sort of coordinators here, feel free to use them also. Don't just wait for Tony. He's got a number of other projects, and there may be some simple things that you all can resolve among yourselves between these meetings every 2 weeks. Don't just wait for the next Friday morning, because there's a lot of good issues that are being raised here this morning, and maybe among yourselves you can debate those and so on. There's no rule that says you can't talk to each other between meetings. You just can't make decisions.
Right, and I think the worst thing that can happen for me is we get at a 2-week meeting, some information was issued, and you say, oh geez, I had some questions, but I wanted to wait until we're together because I really didn't understand some aspect, right? Call me, let's set up a time. Not everything has to be discussed in the group forum. Answers have to be made, decisions have to be discussed and voted on. But if you're questioning something, call me Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I don't care. I do this for a living because I love what I do. And quite frankly, that hopefully comes through in everything that we do together. you're never bothering me. I might be in the middle of something and say, I got to think about it and get back to you in a little bit, but please, do not hesitate.
Adam Ricker, the town planner. I just wanted to echo the idea that Newport Road is part of the downtown. And in fact, I think it could provide an advantage where we could really set the tone for what a building could look like. I think maybe we all wish that that end of town looked a little bit more like this end of town and a little less suburban strip mall. And if we had the opportunity to really control that space, we could actually design it to look a bit more quaint and matching our town.
Chief, I just want to reiterate that my question about dispatch was not whether New London should ever give up its dispatch, whether or not it should be regional.
Okay.
You know, what do we benefit by helping the other towns? But I totally agree with you that New London should never give up dispatch for New London.
Thanks, Bruce, yeah.
Colin Beasley, resident of London. Three things. One is on dispatch, the devil's in the detail, up to and including the definition of dispatch. So I do think it's an appropriate conversation to have, particularly as the cost structure is impacted by it. But I guess that will play out in time. So I'll leave it for future conversations. Site selection. I read the contract that was signed, and there is things in the contract that are not being addressed by the architects, environmental issues associated with the site selection, traffic studies, those items. How's that process going to work? Because those things will cost money and could impact the design of the building. So does this committee have responsibility for the site selection decision and then the ongoing work that comes out of that? Or is that going to be a different venue? Does anybody, I guess that'd be a question for the select board? Or Tony, or, yeah?
Yes, so right now, it's not part of the current process because we were looking at a wide variety of sites. If you think back a few months ago, we had 11 sites or something. We certainly don't want to spend money on traffic studies, geological, environmental, bugs, bunnies, endangered species, and all that across a wide variety of sites that may never play out, right? This process, as it was coming out of that site selection, coming out of the hiring of colliers, the next step is to get a designer on board to go through the program, to go through the 2 studies, and see if one of those top 3 sites that were chosen or considered, most considerable, right? Most advantageous, should we then go to that next step of spending the money, hiring consultants to do traffic study, geology, all the things that you described. So we want to make sure that, first off, if we have round numbers of 15,000 square foot building, and we look at those 3 sites, do all 3 of them accommodate that size building with that level of parking, with all the other things, or does this study process take the 3 down to 1? Now, we've already heard 1 is kind of off the table. So now we're looking at 2 plus here. That would be the next level of process once we determine square footage of dispatch, square footage of PD, number of parking spaces, segregated public parking, patrol parking, all of that. So that would be in the next phase. We would put that into a budget, come back to this group and say, hey, this looks like the number 1 preferred site. If we don't own it, that has a different level of conversation where the town would then have to seek permission from a current property owner to go out there and do those investigations, whether it's wetlands or, environmental endangered species. So that process is going to follow this 10, 12-week process.
How does that, in your mind, Tony, how does that fit into the schedule associated with the warrant article? Will it be done beforehand so that the town will understand the cost implication of those studies and the possible design impacts of the results of those studies into the cost structure?
So that full cost will come in that September, October timeframe.
Okay.
Where that fits in a warrant process right now.
You'll have an estimate in September that should fit in, right? So. That's
Is
fine.
that what we're trying to hit?
Yeah, okay.
Is have this
That's fine.
done
Okay,
for that.
good, okay.
I thought there was a conversation of having it done before people leave for the winter or some other.
We don't leave for the winter, Tony. We actually come into town during the winter.
Okay.
No, and my last one is really just a comment. The last conversation was talking about how you want to meet and how you're going to transfer information. I think the first meeting you talked about trying to engage the public, and I appreciate what you have to do as far as getting information flowing amongst the committee members. How does that information get to the community for their input? If we're sitting here every other Friday and the committee has had work on, I'll talk about the program, and they've looked at and asked questions amongst all of yourselves, with you, Tony, for 2 weeks, and all of a sudden we're sitting there with what's our input? How does the community input play into your process that you're designing here? And then I'll leave it.
So I guess how that would normally work, we're going to have a series of documents, probably daily communications between Bob and I and the PD, and there's going to be documents, whether it's, hey, we reviewed the square footage, here's what the room layout, or here's what the room indexes are, right? A room-by-room list with the proposed square footages. There are committees that don't share that level of information with committees until it comes out at a public meeting. Sorry that you left the podium, but I'll continue. There are others that say, Tony, as soon as you get it, send it out, post it, share it so that it is more readily available. Since you're bringing the question up, I would ask, and we're lucky to have, fortunate to have the select board here as well. I don't know how rapidly this community, this committee wants that unvetted, unfettered information to be out there. Because again, there may be errors in it. There may be things that the committee doesn't agree with.
I would personally, it's not my committee, I would discourage having unvetted information out there, because it just causes noise that's not required, right?
Right.
On the other hand, my apologies. On the other hand, I think it's important that there's some accounting for community input into the process. So if during the 2 weeks interval, I'm going to make, again, I'll use the program, the committee says, oh yeah, we need 12,000 square feet. And then there are other players who might have an interest in understanding that in greater detail and bring something else to the table that would suggest, oh, maybe it's really 10,000 square feet. How does that play out? So I'm just asking the committee to appreciate that community input may be beneficial to the outcome of the conversation, and that, but at the same token, Tony, unfettered information is just noise, so I would discourage that.
I'll leave it to the committee to discuss. I've shared my experience with it, and we seem to be in of the same opinion.
It doesn't have to be solved today. All I'm asking is the committee to recognize that, and it's not going to be every single issue. It's just, keep in mind that there may be community input. That's all.
Colin, I can answer that question. So I'm seen in town a lot on the college. I run into a lot of townspeople daily. They stop me, ask me different questions. I don't have any issues with discussing the matter of the committee or how the project's going. So I do communicate with a lot of community members that I do see during the day, so you know.
Listen, I think that everybody on the committee communicates with people. What I'm trying to get to is where information is being shared that is going to have an impact on the final financial analysis, and how maybe the committee is going to vote yea or nay on something. And if the community is not aware of that until the day of the vote, then the community has not been able to, because when you sit down, Jim, and I don't pretend to understand what kind of conversation you have, but I'll play the movie out. You're sitting here talking to Joe Schmuck, walking around the campus. I'm sure that Joe Schmuck doesn't fully appreciate that there's, a discussion about the dispatch center at 10,000 square feet, I'm being extreme, or the police chief wants, a marble desk those conversations aren't going to play out with you and that player who's talking about it. It's probably general. That until it becomes public what the details are, your communications with those folks won't get to those details. And if it's after the decision's been made, the community hasn't had input. That's all I'm saying. So again, I don't know what the answer is, but there ought to be some accounting for how does the community provide input to the process. It could be that you say the community doesn't, and you'll have input to the final end state. That's your call, right? But there's, some people in the community might be upset by that. So I'm just asking you to think through that. That's all.
I also think this committee is a representation of the community,
Yeah.
and we've been asked to sort of play much of what you're asking for. So I think that there is a fine line here of who has input rights, who has decision rights. But I do think that we were asked to, I think, play that role
Yeah.
that you're asking for.
So can I put words in your mouth? Which is,
Sure.
I think what I'm hearing you saying, which is okay, don't take me wrong, that the committee being a representative sample of the community can make decisions about what this outcome should be without necessarily getting community input all the time. Is that a fair, and which is fine, it is
Yeah,
a way to
I
run.
think right now at this stage, again,
Yeah.
we are 3 meetings
Yeah.
in, and we
Yeah.
have not really kicked off
Right.
much of anything. I
Correct.
think all of this will flush out over time.
Yeah.
But in my experience, we've got a committee of folks that have been asked to play, I think, the role that you
Yeah.
are talking about. If we continue to put everything out to the entire community, we are in
That's a fair point.
paralysis.
Yep, yep.
Colin, it's been how many years have we been at this?
Too many.
Yeah.
Okay, so having the full community discussion has led us 10 years later
Yeah.
to form this
Paralysis.
committee.
Yep.
And so that analysis paralysis is what we're experiencing. And
Yeah.
so the select men and women have put together this team this committee to speak for the townspeople. I think we're a pretty decent representation
okay.
of the townspeople. Also, we're all embedded in town. We're all talking to people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So-
I can envision a world where there are things that we put out potentially for folks to react to, but I don't know if it's going to be what I suspect you're hoping for.
I'm not sure I know what I'm hoping for.
Okay.
I don't.
Yeah.
I'm reflecting back on the first meeting, Tony, where you had indicated that you'd figure out a way to bring in community questions, for example, whether it was going to be a website or something like that. And so, would that play into your role? And how
Sure.
that plays? Because that has not been set up yet, which is fine, because I know we're just getting started. But there was conversation on the first meeting about that, so is that still in play, right?
I think, from what I know at this point, the chief, the select board, the work group, they're taking citizen input in a wide variety of ways.
Okay.
How we funnel that down to a pipeline that delivers that information for consideration to the work group, we still need to work on and refine.
I think that's a good way of putting it. Yeah,
I
that's-
think to the point of the larger, broader community weighing in, as a means of a working committee, back to the question of how often have you worked with committees, there's going to be very little that gets presented to this committee at a meeting with the expectation that they will make a vote or a recommendation or a decision that morning. They don't work in a vacuum. I don't work in a vacuum. We're sharing that information. For those critical, hey, this week we're going to review the square footage of the dispatch center, and we're going to review all the technology requirements of the regional dispatch. The committee, the broader group, is going to have that information at least a week ahead of time so that they can get their thoughts in line. If they want to share that with the select board and it falls in line with a meeting, that's all going to play out. It's not going to be, geez, there was only 3 people here from the public input and a decision was made. Now, if the public doesn't show up, half the time they don't unless there's a dollar value on the table.
Yeah.
They'll let everything else go until they hear the committee's going to weigh in on money, then everybody shows up in the room. How did we get here and why is it being rushed is usually the 2 responses that we hear after a year of meetings. but I digress. The other thing to keep in mind is that the work group is advisory. They're making a final recommendation. If they're deciding to drop dispatch or add dispatch, or the building needs to be 10 or 12,000 square feet, whatever numbers you were using, that's going to be a recommendation that goes to the select board. This group is not going to be able to put something on a warrant.
No, I understand
Or
that.
get a town
Yeah,
vote.
I understand that.
So again, there's another
Yeah.
level and another opportunity
Yep.
for the broader citizenry to weigh in and say, why did the group make that decision? Why is that their recommendation of the select board?
Mm-hmm.
And if it is, we're going to go to the select board meeting and we're going to tell them we don't like the decision, right? So hopefully there's some checks and balances in our process.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone, appreciate it.
Rich Epstein, resident. Maybe backtracking on the dispatch center topic. I guess I'm trying to, there's so much already said, but I still can't tell if you're already saying that the current site can't be used if we have the dispatch center there. I can't tell if you're already in that situation.
First of all, we're just getting started, and I glad to say that neither John or I visited the police department against our will in the past when we've been in town. So I think that we're so jumping the gun. All I really said was that other studies have looked at the current site. We've looked at them a little bit. We haven't studied every single page. I say we're just getting started really today, but really next week. There has to be an understanding whether the site can, everything goes back to the space program. So when you guys were talking about your outreach, I was looking at the Harriman program and I was looking at the Myers program, but we're gonna do a brand new program, okay, space program. Until we have that space program, it's gonna tell us where we should be in 10 or 20 years, because we're not building this building for now. We're building it for, it's gonna be here 50 years or more, right? We're not going to be able to tell you, in all honesty, whether or not it could be here, it can't be here, can we add enough to the building? Forget about that regional dispatch. Can we just build enough space to make it work here, right? We don't know that yet. So I think we can't answer your question, right?
Okay.
And there are other things that come into play about, the site, we need parking. We need to separate the parking. We talked about that 15, 20 minutes ago about how you design a real police station. You don't have everybody parked together if you can avoid it. And in the case of this building, you have shared parking with recreation, town hall, police, who knows what's next door. I mean, something else. Colby Sawyer's next door, but probably have their own parking. So we can't answer that question. Is it possible or not? We don't know. Does that make sense? I mean, we just can't tell you right now.
Well, I guess you were referring to some, I don't know if I even have the acronym right.
Oh, you mean
IBC?
the code needs for,
Right.
it's a hardened facility, right, John? It's a hardened building, essential facility, survival facility. That's what IBC category 4 is.
I mean, is there information that any resident could look up what
Yeah.
is
You look up-
IBC? I don't even know what IBC stands
National
for.
Building Code Category 4. There's
Okay.
4 categories, 1, 2, 3, and 4.
I guess I'll try to simplify it. So the current facility right now has a dispatch. It's in this building, which is fine. If we go to a regional dispatch, that requires different requirements for structure. This particular building is probably not designed in that way, and that's the only reason why we're saying that a regional dispatch could probably not be here in this building unless we built something like an addition to it to make it
okay.
structurally sound, because a regional one, if there's a hurricane, the building needs to withstand hurricane or certain winds and things like that we're talking about. That's the category 4.
Okay, because I've never heard
Well,
much talk
we are not
about
saying that-
expanding our dispatch center to be larger. So I'm not sure what
We just
everybody's
did.
calling
We just
regional.
expanded it within the last 6 months into the next door office space because we needed more space.
No, but like adopt more towns.
Oh, excuse me.
Right.
Yep. But I guess I would offer, I mean, if whether it's regional or whether it's protecting just the town of New London, we need the dispatch center to stand up still.
Okay.
Under the worst of circumstances.
Okay, because in a different context, what I understood to be a region had like 29 municipalities, and what we have about?
5.
5.
Plus the
So-
ambulance service. Yep.
Okay, so if I'm understanding what you just said, regional is 5.
Regional is relative.
Yeah,
Does that help?
exactly. Okay, I understand it. But it sounded like what you were saying is if you're kind of needing to grow it, and I haven't heard we're looking at becoming a regional, like supporting 29 municipalities.
We don't know
No.
what size it needs to be
we don't
right
know.
now.
Okay.
To determine that.
Yeah.
And then we're going to work with the town to figure out if it needs to be regional or just local.
Okay,
Local is totally different from regional.
okay.
The other thing too is that when we look at the programming piece, there's a lot of talk about sharing with the community. It's very important to keep community involved. But, as Tony said like an hour ago, we were hired because we're experts. So we have an idea as to what a booking cell should be, how a booking processing area should be designed, and we're going to be economical. But it's got to be, the issue with a police station is he has to be operationally sound. He has to be operationally sound. So it is a specialty. It is, it's not a retail center. It's a very specialized situation. And just because it's a smaller community and the building won't be a gigantic building, of course, it has to be operationally sound. And that's what's going to guide the design team, right? If somebody wants to argue with us about the size of a cell, we welcome that, but people have to trust that we know what we're doing, when we're doing that programming and design, so.
I guess I would just conclude that with, the International Existing Building Code. Anybody can Google it, look up the various categories. When you start modifying and you expand, as Chief said, into the next room and you do smaller additions and renovations, it's no different than your home or the place you work or this building, this hall. Minor renovations and additions do not trigger larger projects. When we look at, we are doing a major renovation, if we were to look at a major renovation on the existing facility, it would trigger broader response to bringing the entire facility up to code. And that's when we start getting mandated by code that says, okay, you want to replace windows and doors and a few things, great. You want to do anything more than that, you're now super enforcing your structure. And when you trigger those elements, does it still make sense within the envelope that you have? So those are the kind of things that folks will, as you read through, if people do Google it, what the requirements are of an essential facility really drive some of what our project is going to be designed as. And to that end, you may all determine, if we've got to do all that to keep this facility up and running as an essential facility, it needs to not be attached to the historic building, because we can't have this building fall on our essential facility and trap people in there, right?
Okay, so I have a different, maybe going back to the other completely different topic about sharing information. If that maybe, I've got the baggage of, I come from the high-tech world where everything's shared, and I think that actually works out better. You're talking about the concern of analysis paralysis. I think all of the problem with why things have been taking all these years is it hasn't been really openly analyzed. It's been, projects have been done in pockets of limited people making proposals, going to the town for vote, and it was the lack of sharing information that was the problem. So that's just sharing my opinion. it's best to share as much as possible. And you can structure, how you put the data out on a website, that this is just stuff being discussed, and then you can have it in a different place where you say, this is where the committee has kind of come to some sort of an assessment or something like that. But sharing information, I think, where I come from, has always worked out better. Just my opinion. Thank you.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think looking at time, I would love to just understand what you need from us in the next few weeks. Are we meeting next week? I know that there was some talk about the 21st, and then we put this on.
I don't think we'll have anything by then.
Okay.
So I think if we jump that 2 weeks, does that put us?
The 28th. Nope, that's the 28th.
Good. Yeah, let's do that.
I'm personally out of town, but John will be around, but we need to be able to do the programming. That's really important. And we'll communicate, I won't say daily, even though we love this guy, but we'll see how programming goes. But if you ask my opinion, just as a design team, we should meet once we have a program draft, and I don't know if 2 weeks will be enough for that.
Okay.
Well,
That's what the punchline I was going
right,
to get to.
and that's on your end, and that's where
Yeah.
we'll keep them going. Let's all plan on meeting. I think we've got some other things to discuss outside of, they're going to be crunching room sizes, how many people in a conference room, how many people in dispatch, how many people on each shift of dispatch, how many cruisers, how many vehicles. They're just going to now entrench in this detail. I think in 2 weeks, let's regroup and talk about broader information sharing and some of the other things that were raised today. And then I would guess after that, Bob and his team will have some more detailed information. So I'll put together that agenda based on the concerns we've heard today and get that out to everyone.
Yeah, I think you're right, Tony. I think
I got some other stuff outside of architecture and programming
I
to
was
work
just saying
on.
that, I think in the schedule that we came up with, understanding the finish line, right? We're estimating really needing a month to do the programming, because it's reiterative. We'll do a draft, we have to work with the chief, she has to fill out some forms. We have these great other ones done, but we're gonna look at fresh eyes, we're gonna do a draft, we're gonna have a couple back and forth, and then we'll have a viable draft. And that could take it's gonna take several weeks. Some of the stuff that comes after this may be the easiest part, or easier part of it. The program is the bedrock of everything we're gonna do is that program. So.
I just want to add to the committee that once they have something for you to look at, that will be the time that you will be engaged with this, really engaged with this. So it's good to get your ideas out there, but wait until you have a draft to see what they come up with, and then you can react to that, okay?
And if you do have time, go back and look at the other programs that are in there. Because, as Bob said, we're going to be building off those. Some of it's going to be the same response answer. Some of the rooms may change. You've got older programming, current programming, what we're planning for the future. So that's your opportunity to say, well, why did this report say that versus now, that one got big.
The chief wasn't the chief, or you're just becoming the chief, so it's like a different answer now, which is, important.